And good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Namaste Center. We finally thawed out a little bit. It's been a little frigid out in these here mountains up here in North Carolina. I know that I took one step out the front door a couple of days ago and so I decided just to go back in, make some soup, and settle in. And that's unusual for me. I was like, wow, this is weird. I had a plan, and I was going to go into town and go to the bank and go here, go there. I had going to the radio station and going to tape a few shows, and I was like, man, this is weird. It's like, well, you just have to let go sometimes. And I think it was a good lesson, and it was also a good opportunity to just sit still and be silent and be with the day. And I do have the blessing of my little perch. Anyone who walks into my house knows that when you walk in, my office is actually in the living room, and I sit on the same spot on the couch with my legs stretched out, and I look out over the deck into the trees. It's like you're in a tree house. It's beautiful. And actually that seat on the cushion, I'm always having to switch because it keeps getting flattened down, because I'm always there. And then I usually, well, not this week, but usually I have two dachshunds on my lap, and they hang out with me all day long, so that's where I work. So I sat there all day and just admiring the little glistening ice on the leaves and the trees. It's really amazing. I think that's so beautiful. And so as the day went on, and just to see it just grow and grow and grow a little bit, it was a beautiful time. So I was really grateful for this. And I'll be grateful to go back to Florida on Wednesday too. But I do want to just share a few things. I had a miracle in Florida last week. It was really beautiful. I'm facilitating a Course in Miracles down there at the Unity Church in Jupiter, Palm Beach Gardens, Jupiter area. And so anyway, we had a nice group last week, and one of the ladies who had come, I'd only met her once before. She had recently been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. She didn't go into a whole lot of detail, and it was as recent, I think, as that afternoon. And she came that evening, so obviously she was startled and scared, and she was in pain. And the beauty, and I take no credit for this, but over the hour and a half of that time together and sharing ideas from A Course in Miracles perspective on healing and being present and surrender and faith and trust and appreciation, all these things. One of my friends pulled me aside. She said, did you see her face? She looked 30 years younger when she left. And it was just such a testimony to the power of love, the power of the Course, and of course her willingness to be open to receive that. So to be able to make that shift. And the shift obviously took place in her physical body because you could see it, you could literally see it. But more importantly, the shift from fear to love was the true miracle. And you could just feel that she came in frightened and in pain and was able to leave a completely different person. And that goes back to the very first chapter of A Course in Miracles. And the first miracle is there is no order of difficulty in miracles. And I think it's so important that we really give our attention to that idea and be willing to say that there is, and my talk today is, no evidence will convince you of the truth you do not want. Now, if I was to tell a doctor, except for maybe Dr. Morgan here, but if I was to tell a physician that that happened, many of them would just say, yeah, whatever. I actually used to date a doctor, and he was a really funny guy, great guy, and he had no more interest in my woo-woo thoughts than the man on the moon. He just, but we got along great. It was wonderful. And he would say, oh, like that's really sweet, and if it makes people feel better, that's great, but but science says. And I'm like, okay. So he was definitely in that no evidence will convince you of the truth you don't want. But we've got, I believe what the Course in Miracles and other enlightened teachings are here to show us and to teach us is that there's you know, this world, you know, we have bought in to so many ideas and programs that are really designed to keep us trapped and limited in our ability to heal. And I'm not just talking about physical healing, I'm talking about spiritual healing, emotional healing, and limitedness. You know, we have a belief that this is all that we're capable of. And yet the God mind within us, which is such a great gift that we all have. I mean, within us, we are created in that likeness and image of God, which is changeless, formless, and eternal, and totally not affected by anything in this world. Nothing. So I can buy into the illusion, or I can buy into the reality. And it's up to me. I have free will to choose that. I had, did anyone here see on Piers Morgan the other night, oh God, Tony Robbins, thank you, and I could see his face. Tony Robbins, did you see that interview?
Yes.
It was wonderful, wasn't it? And you know, I have to admit, years ago, I just never resonated with that fella. I just thought, well, you know, I didn't dislike him, but I was just like, definitely not on the same vibe. But the more I watch him now, I feel he's grown spiritually. I think his message has matured, and it's not really just about, you know, using our mind to go out and make $1 million or whatever, and you know, get yourself in gear and you can make it happen and all this. And he still definitely comes from that. But what was so impressive was he had this gentleman who had PTSD from the war, who had come. He was probably young, I'd say in his early 40s, I believe. Anyway, he was devastated, and he came to one of Tony's lectures, and of course he got up, asked a question. They showed the film of it, and he was devastated. I mean, this guy was obviously, he was trembling with fear. He was a mess. He was a wreck, and he could barely talk. And by an hour and a half later, he literally got up on stage as a different person. Sort of like this gal the other night. And I'm like, wow, you know, that is the miracle that I know is possible. And what Tony said, you know, Piers is like, well, what'd you tell the guy? You know, basically, how did this happen? And he went on to say exactly what I'm sharing with you guys here today, is that although his symptoms and his pain are very real and hurting and making him suffer, you know, it's about us being willing to go beyond that and tap into the part of us that's whole. And so that's where there is no pain, there's no suffering, there's no limitations within us. And so the message is definitely expanding. It's getting out there in the mainstream. To see this on CNN, constantly negative news, I think that was a positive, I thought that was a real positive statement, you know. And I just think that it was great. So that's another miracle, a shift from fear to love, you know. So yeah, I choose to see the possibilities. Now, the inauguration, I watched, and I stayed in bed. There was another day this week I stayed in bed. And so that was, think about it. But I've had a good restful week. But anyway, I did actually, as soon as that came on, I couldn't move. I was just so taken by it, and I was just, I loved the whole thing. And there was one thing that touched me, and did you all watch it?
Mm-hmm. I was glued to it too.
I was glued to it, and those little Obama girls are the cutest. They're ornery, you know. They're just kids, and I love it. You know, they're just great. But when Senator Lamar Alexander was doing his speech, does anyone remember him? He's a Republican from Tennessee. And he said, this just stuck with me. And he said, when he quoted Alex Haley, the author of Roots, and he said he lived his life by 6 words. Anyone remember that? Anyone? He said, find the good and praise it. And you know, it's, what a great little 6-word mantra to live by. Find the good and praise it. And I thought, oh, you know, it just really, I just felt like all of, you know, this just, because so often we want to justify our means for attack, and we want to make convince everyone of our opinions, and try to, no evidence, in other words, will convince you of the truth you don't want. And then all of a sudden, you know, here's a Republican who's actually saying, you know, after he quoted that find the good and praise it. He says, today we praise the American tradition of transferring or reaffirming immense power as we inaugurate the President of the United States. And so for that moment, he was willing to lay the political partisanship aside and to say that, you know, we are affirming that, we are reaffirming the reinstatement of the President of the United States. And I just thought it was very beautiful, and I felt he was coming from the heart. And I think that, you know, when Obama gave his speech, I thought it was spectacular. I was just, I thought it was the best thing he'd ever said and done myself. And the one thing that he kept reinforcing and affirming is, well, we are one, yes. All men, you know, he went back to the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, you know, that just gives me goosebumps to think, you know, that here is our president. And he is obviously, the whole theme came back to we are one. All men and women are created equal. And that he actually was able to come forth and say that and reinforce that to our nation. And I really choose, I'm not going to bring the political aspect and issues into it. I just looked at him as a man who gave a great speech that day. Let's just leave it at that, and because people may have different views of politics, and that's fine. But I believe that, you know, where are we putting our focus? As we've learned in this, Marianne Williamson, as we've reinforced, I think most of us knew this, about the chapter on faith. And the truth is, as she says, we all have faith in something. We either have faith in fear or love. We have faith in sickness or health, poverty or wealth. And it's where we put our attention and our focus that's going to be manifest in our lives. So we need to really be willing to expand beyond our limited thinking and go into the God mind and see the possibilities rather than the limitation. I really, as I've mentioned in the past, one of my favorite books, and something that just the title in itself triggered me immensely. This had to be 25, 30 years ago, and it was You Can't Afford the Luxury of a Negative Thought. And if you don't even read the book, just pay attention to the title, because the book was actually written for people who had been diagnosed with a terminal illness. And it goes on to explain in a very simple way, it's a very easy read, but how we have to really guard our thoughts, that our thoughts attached to our thoughts are feelings and emotions. And emotions of fear can spread disease like wildfire, while the emotions of love and possibility and peace can just calm things down and heal. So we have to be vigilant, as A Course in Miracles and other teachings say, for God and His kingdom. So I looked, I did a little Google search on that quote, which is from A Course in Miracles, page 333 in the New Edition in the text. No evidence will convince you of the truth you do not want. But as I'm doing the Google search, what came up first, which I thought was interesting, does GMO, I don't know why I thought this was funny, because it's not really, but does GMO corn cause cancer? And so that just struck me like, wow, I'm looking for this profound quote, and does GMO corn cause cancer? And and I was like, well, what's this about? You know, I was thinking, you know, I was going to get all these profound ideas, and but so I poked at it just a little bit. It was an article from Forbes magazine, and it was talking about actually the Monsanto ideas and the Roundup and the chemicals and this whole thing. And there again, no evidence will convince you of the truth you do not want. Now, at one level, in truth, I think if our minds were awake, if we were truly aligned with our God mind, we could just gobble down Roundup and not be affected by it, for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, cheers. And that's we could do that. But in the meantime, maybe, and not from a fear perspective, just be educated and aware and say, this is the scientific evidence on this, and right now maybe Roundup's not the healthiest thing for my system. And so just work with that, and so maybe I don't want to grow a third eyeball. I don't know. Maybe I do. But it's all these things. We can use, I guess the point that I'm choosing to make here is that we can use information as a means. I always refer to the spiral. And, we're living in this world. We believe this is our reality. So we have to work within the framework of where we are. And the way we get through this is to really place our dependence on the mind of God within us, the Holy Spirit within us, which is that bridge from hell to heaven, from fear to love. And the Holy Spirit will maybe say, not ready to eat that GMO corn yet, you haven't enlightened your mind enough or whatever. Choose maybe the organic, or take the aspirin right now. It's nice, maybe next week you'll be able to bless it away. Now take that aspirin for the headache, or what have you. And we get so caught up in wanting to give directions and tell everyone else what to do. This young lady that was at this meeting who shared about her illness, what would you do? I said, first of all, I don't know, because I'm not in that position, and I don't think until we've been in a position we can really say what we would do. And I said, as I've mentioned before, the only guidance I suggest to people is go inside and ask what your best way through this would be. The Holy Spirit will meet us where we are and lead us. For some people, it may be radiation and chemotherapy, and for some people, it may be going to Hippocrates Institute and doing a cleansing. And both are, neither one is more holy than the other. It's just really where our beliefs lie in our healing. And that's the Holy Spirit's purpose, is to meet us where we are and to guide us through everything in our life. So we've had speaking of no evidence will convince you of the truth you do not want, in a worldly level. The NRA is, maybe an example. We have many other issues. I think that right now a lot of issues are really up in the air, up for healing and observation. And so it's up to us. What about guns? I personally, I'm a gun owner, and I think it's fun. I love to shoot, but don't you come on my land. And, but anyway, it's a hobby for me. It's relaxing. I've done it since I was, knee-high to a grasshopper in Kentucky, and I had these uncles. And this is just something that popped in, so you're going to hear it. I had two bachelor uncles who lived on a 600-acre farm in Louisa, Kentucky. And it was a stone house built by slaves, and it was, at one time it was a working, very prosperous farm, for a couple hundred years, and it was in our family. And anyway, the two uncles ended up living there. They were bachelors. One was a retired physician, and the other one, he never worked. He wasn't, never worked. I'll just leave it at that. And anyway, so but we would love nothing more than to go to Uncle Tom and Uncle Frank's for, as long as we could. And so we'd go over there, and of course there were kittens and puppies and guns and, and fishing and everything. I mean, it was like, woo, let's go. So at 4 years old, honest to God, my Uncle Tom, who was a little slow, and he had a big knot here. I'll never forget that big knot. and he always chewed tobacco, and he's looking at you like this, and sweet. I mean, I made him sound like he was a sweet, he was an angel, he really was. And so here, my parents would, you know, they'd just drop us off, you know, we'd say, Yahoo, and he'd take us in, he'd get in the Jeep, okay, they had a couple of old Jeeps out in the driveway, and he'd get in one of these old things which had hay in it, and it barely had a seat in it, and he'd get that thing going into first gear, and then he'd jump out and put me in the driver's seat at 4 years old, and that thing would just, you know, 600 acres, and I was like, and then we'd stop and pull out the 22s and, you know, shoot at cans, and then one day he thought it'd be funny, and he let me shoot a shotgun. And I was 4 years old, and he said, now take a stance. So I'm like this, you know, like this tall, you know, they knocked me over. And and then of course, one of my favorite things was coming home, and my mother always had station wagons, so he would, puppy or kitten, every time we'd go, he'd go and he'd stick one underneath a blanket in the back, and then when we'd get home, I'd say, look what Uncle Tom gave me. And so he always came back with a puppy or a kitten, and so that was good memories of my roots. And then there's the Hatfield side, and so now you know where I come from, and I survived. But anyway, but the point is, I think that even the gun issue, I'm not a person who can, even the guns or Roe v. Wade, a lot of issues, I find the more open-minded I become, I can't really just dig my heels in on one side or another. I choose to see the big picture in both sides and understand that that there is, that to limit ourselves and dig into one side over another is still creating separation. And I really feel like if we could come from the place of, you know, Holy Spirit, what would be the highest and best in this situation? Show me what to do. I don't like the idea of abortion, but I certainly appreciate a woman's right to choose. I just think that there's got to be a way there that it can be used if necessary, but also maybe not as often. That's my belief, and I believe we can find that. Because what we're looking at is if we judge and condemn or take, you know, one side, I'm right, you're wrong, and no evidence you show me is going to convince me of anything different, we're just creating more separation and perpetuating more fear. So it's about us tuning in and tapping into our God minds and living from that place. So the course, I just went back to on page 332 and 333 about the quote, no evidence will convince you of the truth you do not want. And I want to point out just a few key points that this refers to. And number one, and this sort of ties in everything I've been choosing to share today, you may still think that holiness is impossible to understand because you cannot see how it can be extended to everyone. And you've also heard that it must include everyone to be holy. Well, you know, we've heard that, and the Course reinforces that we are one. But we can't even begin, as this goes on to say, we can't even begin to understand what God is or what oneness is. Because it's so far, we're so far removed. We've got our claws dug in so deep to this world, we can't even begin to understand what holiness is, what God is. Because it says there's a tendency to fragment and then to be concerned about the truth of just a little part of the whole. And it says this is a way of avoiding or looking away from the whole to what you think might be better able to understand. And what that's saying, we talked about that yesterday. The Course says that our ego mind just, you know, we got that laser vision and we just focus in on one thing and we are just, that's it. And no evidence is going to convince me of anything different than what I'm choosing to focus on. Where the God mind, when we allow ourselves to be led by Spirit, can see the whole picture, can see that we're all interconnected, we are all one. That the gift of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is here for all of us. All men are created equal. But, you know, our ego mind can't even think that's possible because we're so programmed to focus in on just the fragments rather than the big picture. So it's up to us to be willing to say, okay, maybe I don't know everything. I find less and less, I don't give advice at all, hardly anymore, except Ellen. So because when people come and ask me for, I really don't know. I think, I don't know I'm barely finding out what's best for me, much less for anyone else. But the advice or suggestion I will give is go inside, ask, be led by Spirit. And it says, to you, the miracle cannot seem natural because what you've done to hurt your mind has made it so unnatural, it doesn't even remember what's natural to it. So one thing, I was speaking to Diane earlier, and she was expressing about maybe a course perspective that doesn't entertain the possibility of certain things, supernatural maybe things, because the Course addresses the idea of, say, reincarnation, near-death experiences, whatever. It says, in truth, those aren't real, but if you can use those as a means of being helpful to the awakening, then use it, because this isn't even real where we are right now, but we're using it as a means to spiral up. So I think that sometimes, you know, we can get so fixed on an idea and belief that we don't, there again, allow ourselves to see the big picture. And it's as if we look at an iceberg, and at the very, you know, the tip of the iceberg sticking out is our conscious mind, but the big lot of it underneath the surface is what's guiding us. So every moment I choose love over fear, allow Spirit over ego to guide me, then I'm healing. And the beauty is, I don't have to tell you or fix you or do anything, because every time I choose love over fear, we all benefit by that gift. And so, because there's only one of us here, there's only one mind. So I don't have to go out and fix or change anybody. Next question, does that mean I don't volunteer and do things to serve and participate? No, it doesn't mean that at all. But what's my intention? What's my goal? Is my goal in doing this to reinforce the problem, or to bring light and healing to the situation? So it's always intention. It's all about mind. What mind am I taking into this? And now the big sentence here, no evidence will convince you of the truth of what you do not want, yet your relationship with Him is real. Regard this not with fear, but with rejoicing. The one you called upon is with you. Bid him welcome and honor the witness who bring you glad tidings, for he has come. It is true, just as you fear, but you acknowledge him is to deny that you think you know. So every time I choose that, I'm willing to let my ego aside. I'm willing to not let the evidence of this world limit me to the bigger possibilities. And yet I'm willing to work within the framework of this. So I really encourage us to be willing to open our hearts and our minds, not to think we know it all. Actually, the more I actually had most of you all probably know my career before this was a golf pro. Taught golf for 30 years, played the whole bit. And I was always I felt I was a good teacher, and I was received well as a teacher. But I always worked with the person who I was with. I didn't go in with a snazzy method, the video camera, the breakdown, or this and that. It was just not my way of doing it. Well, 15 years ago, it seemed like that all the technology had really kicked in, and all the teachers were doing this, and you know, the video breakdown, and you put your students swing side by side with Jack Nicklaus, and it looked nothing like it. And it's like, what would that be helpful? That would be depressing if you asked me. So, you know, but anyway, that was something they would do, and then you'd see the students tied up in knots, and they'd be like, you know, keep your head down on the ball, you know, they couldn't move. And so that to me didn't make sense, but I said, well, some people are benefiting, and some people, that's where their minds are, and that's what they relate to, so then that is a good method for them to learn. But I was watching the Golf Channel the other night, and Butch Harmon, who's probably, in my mind, the best teacher in the world, he basically, there again, reinforced the idea that, you know, you can't go around trying to change these people. You know, you've got to work with where they are. You can't sit here and put them on a camera and break down every fragment of their swing. It's paralysis by analysis. But rather, you know, if you're really open to becoming one with that and being led, yes, you need to do the work. You need to understand cause and effect. And if I do this, then this is the effect that will occur. But I'm willing to meet everybody where they are, not where I think that they're going to have their swing. I'm going to get their swing to look like Jack Nicklaus. Yeah. That's not the goal. It's really wanting to meet them where they are and to play better. And I think that's what our role is here, meeting each other where they are, not being critical of someone's opinions because they're different than mine. But rather, as I go back here, and I'll end with this, as we heard in the inaugural speech, find the good and praise it. So if you leave here with 6 words, take those home with you. Find the good and praise it. And so it is.
And so it is.
Namaste.